All right, welcome to our next Fierocast. Today we are going to be talking to Jennifer Goss out in the East Coast. She operates the Mid-Atlantic Fieros. But first, I just want to wish everybody that is here in Illinois that we have moved into Phase 3. And hopefully within the next month, we can move into Phase 4. I know everybody's itching to get out and to get their cars out and start driving and getting, start seeing people and talking to people. But I know for at least for the next couple months, it's probably going to be at least face masks and social distancing of 6 feet. So that's what we have to look forward to. But in the meantime, we're going to hope you enjoy this next podcast. But before we get really in depth here, we want to send our prayers and everything out to Tim and his wife in Michigan, whose shop was taken out by 500-year floods. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But again, welcome everybody. And that's some of the future podcasts that we're going to be discussing are with Paul Vargas and the Fiero Price Guide. We're going to talk to the ladies of N.I.F.E and what it really is like in the life of a Fiero hobbyist. Some original owners. So Jen, I hope you can join us back again for this one. We're going to talk with Christian Sass. He helps run Fiero Focus on the illustration side and design. We're going to chat with Matt from the Fiero store. We're also going to talk to the N.I.F.E guys again about Fiorama. And, we're coming up on that big 25-year anniversary show. We're going to talk with V8 Archie, some of the guys and girls from the Midwest Fiero Club, some of the officers and board members there. And hopefully we can talk to Fred a little bit more in depth on some prototype Fieros. So stay tuned for that one. You can find all the podcasts on FieroFocus.com. You can also kind of get an idea of what we're looking for in future podcasts and a list of our podcasts in Fiero Focus magazine. And then also check us out on our 2 Facebook pages at N.I.F.E Club and at Fiorama. So before we get started, Jen, I just wanted to see if you have any updates on Tim Evans and his wife and anything that's new or anything that's come up from what happened up there.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm certainly being home here in Virginia and watching the photos come across my screen regarding what had happened in Sanford was absolutely heartbreaking. Knowing what type of passion goes into amassing a collection of that size, I just can't imagine how Tim and Linda feel right now. But I hope that their hearts are warmed by the outreach that the Fiero community has given them. I know many owners in that area have been helping with continued cleanup, and our friends at the Michigan Fiero Club were on the scene fairly early on. I know other members on our board of the Midwest Fiero Clubs are also helping Tim with some valuations and other things as he hopefully is able to repair his path to retirement that he was starting upon by the upcoming, what would have been auction of his collection. Speaking of auctions, we decided as a group with the Midwest Fiero Clubs that we are going to be launching a benefit auction of Fiero parts, memorabilia, and other Fiero related items. And when this podcast airs, we're going to be getting ready to kick off the bidding. So hopefully by this point in time, you'll have heard of this benefit auction and perhaps donated an item yourself. We're asking Fiero owners to donate not only an item to the auction, but also the shipping of that item, as that way all of the proceeds from the bidding can go directly to Tim and Linda. Since we're doing it as a club effort, there's no overhead, so all of the bids will go directly to Tim and Linda. And we're hoping to further bolster the GoFundMe effort that their daughters began to help them as they move forward from this tragedy. So stay tuned for that auction, and we hope that you bid and bid well. and we look forward to your participation in it.
That's great. Real quick, how many Fieros were lost, and what type of memorabilia was lost in the shop / museum?
Gosh, the total Fiero count, I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I know that in various photographs that I had seen at one point, I saw 7 Fieros submerged in the main street of the town, but I know that there were other Fieros that were swept to other areas. There were some kit cars. There were also 2 Super Duty engines, including a 16-valve testing engine from GM Performance. There was just years and years of content that Tim had curated for the Fieros Forever Museum. And unfortunately, some of that stuff is just irreplaceable.
Wow, that is truly devastating on especially during what's going on now too. And I can't imagine what they're going through. That's got to really hit home, or hit right at the heart of he's getting ready to retire too, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, well, I hope and everybody that's listening can join in, and if you have anything that you want to part ways with for a good cause, please do so. So, who should they contact, or are you guys going to have that up on the Midwest Fiero Club's website, or?
So we'll have it up on the Midwest Fiero Club's Facebook page and hopefully the Midwest Fiero Club's website by that point in time. And although by the point in time that you may listen to this podcast, the auction may have begun, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, especially if it's right around June 15th. If you do have an item that you'd like to get on there, the bidding is going to close June 30th. And so we would still be able to get an item up if you get it to us very quickly. And you can reach me at jennifer.g@fieropride.com. And if you have any questions at all or want to help in another way, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get you moving in that direction.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that info. So, all right. Well, let's again. Hopefully that goes awesome, and everybody donates stuff, and a lot of money is raised to help, because again, that is something that has really devastated them up there. So, all right. Well, let's get started. And first question I got for you is, does Fiero run through your blood?
Yeah, it definitely does. And ultimately, I've got to blame my dad for starting it.
That kind of seems to be the trend, because usually anybody that I've talked to, it all starts with either a father or a grandparent or grandfather. And same with me. It started with my grandfather, and he got me involved, and it's something that truly kind of starts way back before you even think of it. So when did the Pontiac Fiero become part of your life?
Well, in May of 1985, my parents received their 85 GT from A.W. Golden Pontiac in Reading, Pennsylvania. And the journey to the car actually began the previous November in 1984, when they learned that they had won one of 2 grand prizes in the Mac Again, Back Again sweepstakes. Back in the early 1980s, ATM cards were a very new concept, and the very first branded ATM card was known as a MAC card, capital M-A-C. And apparently the first time they attempted to introduce the MAC cards, it wasn't a smashing hit, so they reintroduced them in 1984 and launched this sweepstakes. And they were offering 2 grand prizes, which were brand new 1984 Pontiac Fiero coupes. I later found out at the 35th anniversary that these were among 26 sweepstakes cars that Pontiac released that year to various companies around the United States to use in such contests. And in this particular contest, every time you used your MAC card, you were entered to win. And I remember my mom going to the MAC machine daily and withdrawing $5 to up their chances. The bank was just around the corner from our neighborhood, and I just remember her going there, and we'd have to go to the bank and we'd have to go to the MAC machine. And secretly, I think she wanted to win to make it up for my dad not being able to purchase one. He desperately wanted one for a commuter car, but they couldn't justify it with 2 small daughters and another 2-seater, my dad's 62 Vet, occupying the other garage space. So even though Dad's name is on the count, Mom probably won the car, and that's been a point of contention between them ever since. When he got the call, he actually thought someone was playing a joke on them and hung up. And so after they finally got his attention, he asked about upgrading the winning car to the forthcoming GT model that he knew was going to be released thanks to his brother who worked at GM. And since the GT was not yet ready, they couldn't take delivery on the car until that May. And I was 4 years old at the time, and I'll never forget the car pulling up in front of the house. I thought it was the Knight Rider car because it was black. And I was super disappointed that it didn't talk back to me.
You know what? I'll just say that I am a very big fan of Knight Rider, and that's like my ultimate dream car. When were you able to start driving the Fiero?
Well, the very first time I actually got behind the wheel of a car that wasn't on our property, it was the Fiero. We had a small horse farm at the time where my parents still live in Ole, Pennsylvania. And my dad had a beater truck that I was occasionally allowed to drive between the barn and the house, which wasn't very far. But in the winter before my 16th birthday, my dad had this penchant for taking the family out on snow drives to see how various vehicles in the family fleet handled in different conditions. And so on that particular day, my dad loaded up me, my 3 years younger sister, Jamie, and I in the Fiero and took us to the local high school. And when we pulled into the parking lot, he told me to get behind the wheel. And just as everybody settled in, a local police officer started to cruise through the lot. Probably thought we were a bunch of kids up to no good. And so my dad was cool as a cucumber. Jamie's kind of scrunched down on the floor, and Dad looked over and said to me, "You better pull forward and drive out of here, or we might get into big trouble. And whatever you do, don't stall." And I'd never driven a manual before, so I was terrified. Fortunately, as I started to pull towards the exit, the officer went out the other one, and we were able to get Dad back in the driver's seat a short while later and make the trip home safely without getting in trouble.
Nice. Do you guys still have that first Fiero?
As a matter of fact, we do. It came to Virginia in 2018. Dad wasn't really driving it as much, and so he decided that it was time to unload it. And there was actually another Fiero owner who was potentially interested in the car, and when I found out Dad was going to sell it and to sell it to someone outside of the family, I launched a quick campaign to ensure that the car would come to Virginia with me. And so
Nice.
it now sits in my garage.
Awesome. How many Fieros do you currently own?
We currently own 5.5, which is actually down from the high point of our Fiero owning career. At one point in the early 2000s, my dad was kind of an urban legend. After having only one Fiero in the family until about 1999, by the early 2000s, we had about 26 on the property, most of which were running. Yeah. And every family member, my mom, my dad, my sister, and I had a show Fiero and then a daily driver Fiero. And Dad was also doing repairs for people, and we also began flipping Fieros and then also parting out some that weren't salvageable. And so I would occasionally meet people that would see me with a Fiero, and they'd be like, "Did you hear about that guy out in Ole? He has like 100 or 500. And I would always chuckle. But so today we're down to 5.5, which includes a go-kart, but there is another one on the way.
Nice. What are some of the, you probably got many, what are some of, it'll say pick a couple stories that you have about some of those Fieros? I know we just talked about the one, but what are, just over the many years, what are some of like the unique stories that have come up and that you've done with the cars?
Well, I mean, probably the first one, my first favorite would be kind of a tie between Dad's car and my actual first Fiero. Driving the 85 GT was a great privilege, and it definitely wasn't going to be my first car. In fact, in 1996, when I turned 16, it probably only had about 40,000 miles on it. And yeah, and it was in really, really good shape. Dad kept it always in the garage. He kept it very nicely. So my first car ended up being a Dodge Omni purchased for $500 off of an old lady who only used it to go to the grocery store. And I drove that car for about 2.5 years and started hanging out with a group of friends that really was into cars, and the Omni just didn't cut it. So I borrowed Dad's Fiero as often as I could, but ultimately knew I wanted to upgrade. And so my initial idea was to purchase like an Eagle Talon or Mitsubishi Eclipse, as those were all the rage at the time. However, my dad said absolutely no foreign crap, as he called it, in his garage. So I started to think about Camaros and Firebirds, but didn't have the income nor the real passion for them. And so one day, Dad took me over to a friend's house to go for a ride in his 86 GT that had a stroked 83 with a 200-shot bottle. And Henry was a former Formula Ford driver, and his car, which he actually still owns, had a fully custom independent suspension that he had designed. And I will certainly never forget my ride in that car, nor my first close-up look at a fastback. And so I was hooked, and from that point forward, knew what I wanted, my own fastback that would ultimately receive a V8. And so we started, yeah, that was the goal, like right from the start. And so we started the hunt. And shortly thereafter, a silver 88 GT with a 5-speed was listed in the local paper. And Dad and I took it for a ride. And while we liked the car, he knew that it would need a clutch. And so we made an offer lower than what the owner was asking, and the owner they'd think on it. And Dad was getting ready to take the rest of the family on a trip to Canada and told the lady that we'd call her back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I had absolutely no luck finding another car. I grew increasingly anxious about being able to get one. And I was leaving for the beach before my parents returned. And the night before I left, I drove by where the car was parked, and it was still there. But on the way home, a deer ran into the back of Dad's 85 GT, which he had specifically requested I not drive at night. But Dad wasn't home. In fact, he wasn't even in the country. So I took the chance. The remainder of the way home, I was absolutely terrified of what I would find behind the driver's side door, where I knew it had hit the car. And I pulled it into the garage, got out, closed my eyes, and turned around, only to see a tuft of hair and no damage.
Wow.
So, yeah. It would actually be years until I told Dad what happened that night. So if he's listening, he already knows this story. But I left for the beach the next day, and I called home every single day. And Dad claimed that he had not yet called the woman back about the 88 GT. And the day I returned from what was actually a pretty rotten trip, he said he was sorry, but the car had been sold and some kid had bought it. And so I was devastated. Yeah, absolutely devastated, because I could not find another fastback in those 2 weeks. And I think Dad felt bad for me, because 2 days later, on the night of my parents' wedding anniversary, Dad let me borrow the 85. And I was at a friend's house for about an hour when my mom called and said, "Your dad's super mad you have the car. Come home right now. He needs it." And I was confused because he had given me the keys just over an hour before. So I drove it home, and my friends were behind me. And as I pulled around and attempted to pull the car into the garage, the opener wouldn't work. So I parked the car and went to open it manually. And just as I walked up to the door, the garage door opened, and inside the garage was my family with the silver 88 GT that some kid had bought.
Oh,
and
wow.
The kid was me. And my dad had known that I was getting a loan from the First Bank of Grandma, so he actually just borrowed the money and purchased the car and brought it. So, and I still have that car. It's getting ready for the engine to be put back in, as it had had a Stuckey GR valve and a cracked exhaust manifold that had to be rectified. So,
oh, very cool.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
that's one. I could probably do a whole podcast on some of the others. But almost all of my memories include like family trips to like FOCOA nationals, the anniversary shows, meeting Fiero friends that I still hold dear 20 plus years later.
Wow.
The first year we went to Columbus, my dad's fuel pump went, and it was our first introduction to the national Fiero community, and seeing how so many people pitched in to help him was absolutely incredible. Especially Steve Gerhardt, who basically gave up his entire day to help Dad. And he's someone that we've lost track of over the years, but if anybody knows where he is, I'd certainly love to see him again. Dad won the Hard Luck Award that year, and then actually repeated the fuel pump feat while at an off-site trip at the 25th anniversary show. And then at the 20th, he was having too much fun at Waterford Hills and spun his number 4 bearing. So he has quite a few Hard Luck trophies. And Waterford Hills is also home to another favorite memory. I was a little tentative on my first trip out in the track. So on the second, Steve, one of the Michigan Fiero Club members and an instructor at Waterford Hills, rode with me and gave me some pointers that increased my confidence. Of course, I got a little too confident in the backstretch and ended up wiping out the Blue Demon around a far turn. Thankfully, the only damage was that it became filthy because Rob Bartlett was right behind me and he was able to avoid the carnage. But of course, we know Rob owed me one, of course, after depriving me of the opportunity to drive Jimmy's car the year before at Dell's when he broke it before I was able to start driving it. So.
Oh, we should ask Rob about that.
Yeah. Well, after the last podcast, I figured I had to get my side of the story. But ultimately, my favorite memory will probably always be the Blue Demon's first Carlisle. We were working on its build until the night before. It broke on the way there, and Dad had to fix it on a trailer under an overpass near his house. He then drove the empty truck and trailer to Carlisle just in case, while we all drove our Fieros. My mom drove his 85 GT. And that year, my dad won first place in stock notchback. My sister won first place in high mileage fastback. And I won my very first award with Blue Demon, a first place in
wow, very
custom
cool.
notchback. Yeah. And so the three of us kind of standing there holding our trophies is a moment that I'll treasure forever. And it was definitely a really great day.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you know how, from the time you started to now, do you know how much time you spent working on your Fieros?
I would really be afraid to add that up. I mean, to say lots, including many late nights before shows tying up loose ends.
Well, the word Fiero and Fieros live on in future generations.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, Ashley learned the word Fiero before she learned the word Corvette. And much to Matt's chagrin, she would frequently call our 98 Vet Daddy's Red Fiero.
Nice.
But Ashley's 6, and she's already claimed our white 86 coupe as her Fiero. And she also knows the same rumbling downshift of the black 85 GT that I used to hear at her age, signaling that my dad was coming home into the neighborhood. And since Dad's car now lives with us, Matt occasionally drives it to work, and it makes my heart happy when she hears that same noise and announces Daddy's coming home, just like I did at her age.
Very cool. So you mentioned the Blue Demon, and how and where did the Blue Demon start?
Well, it was a warm summer night. I mean, really, it was a warm summer night in June of 2001. And I was on my way somewhere with a friend, and I saw it parked alongside the road. And from a distance, the blue paint and aftermarket rims that my poor college self couldn't afford for my 88 GT or my 86 coupe pulled me in. By that point in time, I had a daily driver, silver 5-speed 86 coupe, and I turned it around with my friend chuckling the whole time because he knew what I was thinking. And when I pulled in, I saw the car had a sign on it that said $1,000, their best offer. The owner came out and told me that he had bought it as a project because the previous owner's girlfriend had taken the car out when he broke up with her and trashed it. She took a scissors to the interior, a baseball bat had scuffed and broken some of the exterior, including some of the glass. She burned off the tires and also supposedly ran it out of gas. And the guy that had bought it had never gotten it running. And from what he described, in my experience, it sounded like it was likely a fuel pump. So I had recently received my student loan refund check and thought I had some money to burn. So we agreed on $850 and that I would pick it up on Friday. And I'll never forget calling my dad and say, so I bought this car.
How and why did you come up with the name of the Blue Demon?
Well, if I didn't love this car so much, I'd honestly say it was possessed. It's literally prided itself in fighting me at nearly every turn. After bringing it home, it sat until that December when I had finally had the time with my dad to get into the car. And he pulled it into the garage the day after Christmas and told me that if I wanted to prove to him that we could put a 3.4 liter into the car and restore it to its former glory, that I needed to remove the coolant lines by myself. And so he sat upstairs with my uncle that had worked at GM. And hours later, I finally called up on the intercom that I had succeeded in removing the first line. And I'll never forget him coming down into the garage and opening the door and laughing as I stood there covered in antifreeze. I probably looked like a sewer rat with bloody knuckles, but I was holding a piece of hose. And he then laughed and said, well, we can just cut the second one. So the original goal was to have the car done by Daytona that year. but a series of issues, including a misdrilled set of starter holes that had been done by the kid from whom we purchased the 3.4 liter. He had said he could do the holes for us and unfortunately didn't know what he was doing. And so we had to get them re-drilled, and that was a process. There was another miscommunication with the machinist that led to some knocking that we then had to have redone. And then in the lead up to, I think it was the week of Carlisle, which was the final goal for completion, we were taking the car to get new tires on it. And I think Dad and I were both exhausted because someone hadn't tightened the lug nuts all the way. And we got about halfway to the tire shop and the wheels started vibrating. And thankfully we were near friends and were able to get the situation rectified. And then on the morning of its first Carlisle, the alternator belt came off in the pouring rain. And so, yeah. And so every time I drive by that underpass on the way to my parents', I think of being parked there and waiting for my dad to come back with the truck and trailer. He was not in the best of moods. And we got the car up on the trailer and he changed the belt and we got the car back off because I wanted to drive it to the show. And so before it even went to its first show, it had earned that name.
What have you, I got to see this at the 35th, and I'll say, I mean, this car is awesome. And I wish I was able to spend a little bit more time. I took so many pictures of it, but I wish I would have been able to like spend a little bit more time just looking at the details. What have you done to the car? I mean, the paint job itself is just immaculate and very, very cool. But yeah, what are some of the things that you've done to it, and what are some of the issues that you've had with the car?
Well, what I haven't touched on the car would be a shorter list. Actually, it would probably be a non-existent list. So Dad and I, with the help of a great team of friends, because basically any one of my friends, car lovers or not, that wanted to spend time with me that winter, spent it with me in the garage. And we stripped and painted the front and rear compartments to match the car, which involved removing every single component in the front compartment and the rear compartment. And let me tell you, there are a lot. Sanding and prepping those sections, which was incredibly tedious, and then reinstalling everything. We then changed over the interior to dark gray trim, including the dash, and installed custom carpets and mats from ACC, as well as a set of Mr. Mike's seat covers and an aftermarket radio. We upgraded the headlights to 8788 headlights. We put the initial install, we did the 3.4 liter V6 out of the 95 Camaro with a bigger lift cam, got it bored 30 over. It had 19-pound injectors with 11-to-1 compression. The original idea was to turbo it, but the compression was a little higher than would have been ideal. And ultimately, in the end, we just wanted to get the car on the road and enjoy it as it was for a while. The car also received the very first set of Goss Stage 3 scoops that were ever made. And then when Matt came on the scene, he designed the unique front end that's still on the car today. And we had the car painted by Bill and Earl Sessions in Waldorf, Maryland, who are twin brothers, who are body guys by day and Fiero owners by night. And they, through the years, have helped us with maintenance and a few touch-ups on the car, including the installation of a whale tail spoiler. And then for my very first dog Mother's Day, Matt surprised me with a new set of rims. And so
Nice.
that's some of the stuff I've done. Done some little custom touches like redesigning the sail panel frames and then getting sail panels from Paul McKibben, embroidering the front speaker covers, and just little touches here and there. Ultimately, though, my goal has been to keep it classically Fiero looking. And I think I've stuck by that pretty much. So, and issues, well, I think we've covered a lot of them.
Yeah, so I would highly recommend trying to get to see this car, whether it's at Carlisle or, you know, unfortunately, you probably have to wait a couple of years if you want to see it at the 40th anniversary show. But you know, I would highly recommend just really looking at the car because it is a sight to see. Do you feel that you're done modifying the car, or do you feel that there's other projects that you want to tackle with it? Because I know sometimes when you get to that point, you're like, there's not much more that I can do, but you still want to do stuff to the car.
So I learned early on from a friend, fellow Fiero owner, that you can over modify a car. As I watched him take a car that really looked complete and then kind of just kept adding little touches to keep that fire fueled. And it got to the point where I think the car was a bit overdone, and I think he thought the same thing. So I'm really cognizant of not doing that. Anything I do to the car now receives a lot of really careful thought. Before the 35th, Matt did, with my assistance, completely remove the suspension and powder coat everything, which looks really amazing, and I'm grateful to him for that. We did that all here at home. And I think really the only other thing is it's likely that one day it's going to get an LS4. I really kind of feel that that's the car's final piece. But for sure, the 3.4 liter my dad and I built will definitely live on in one of our other cars.
Besides Carlisle and the 35th, where can maybe some people see the car locally? I know you guys draw a lot from, was it the New England Club as well? Where can I mean, do you take the car out on shows a lot, or is it something that you only really take to Carlisle or some of the anniversary shows?
So it's been kind of tough the last, gosh, 8 or so years. We kind of took a break from Fieros for a while, not from enjoying the cars, but from going out and showing. My sister first bought a horse farm in Pennsylvania, and we were helping her with that. And then in 2012, we moved to Virginia. And in 2013, we had our daughter. So it was kind of a few years there where the car spent more time in the garage. But in the time since, we've had it out, of course, to the 35th, to Carlisle. It also will go to other events in the Mid-Atlantic region. But sometimes it's tough to get a family of 3 to a show in the Fiero. So, and we also, as I mentioned, have other cars that we do enjoy taking as well. So likely you'll see it at some regional events, but then of course it will be at the 40th. And I'm hoping to get to Fiero Rama one of these days with it too.
We would love to see it. I know, I mean, that would draw a big crowd too. So, most recently, you've had it the 35th at in East Peoria, and at that show we had a lot of representatives that had worked for GM, including John Calley's and I think 5 or 6 others as well, and they had a great chance to spend a lot of time with the Fiero owners and looking at just the cars in general. When they saw your car, what compliments and what did they tell you, or what did they see in your car that what did they talk to you about your car?
Well, they definitely chuckled at how the fact that every bolt in the engine compartment and other compartments of the car were painted. They wanted to know how often I redid them, and chuckled at my spray can cap and paintbrush method that many have seen me doing at the shows. But I had the most in-depth conversations with Ben Shyway and John Cowley's. But truly enjoyed, meeting everybody. They were also wonderful with their time, and it was a Super Duty Indy, and talking to John and Ben about that was really cool. But Ben really was wowed by the color. He just thought that it was an incredible color, and John, in one of my proudest moments, picked it as one of his top 5 cars in the show, and he said that he loved how,
cool.
yeah, I mean, it was such a shock, and like it meant so much to both Matt and I. He said he loved how I kept it classically Fiero while making tasteful upgrades, and he too was wowed by the color. And through the years, we've spent a lot of time on paint maintenance, and he said it really showed. So that was really neat.
What would you say, your thoughts on the car, looking back on where it started and where it is now, and where it may lead to in the future?
That car, out of all of the cars that are in my garage, probably definitely has, aside from Dad's 85 GT, the closest connection between me and my dad. and all the hours that we spent together on that project are just hours that mean the world to me. And I'm so grateful for that time that we had together, as it also shaped me into the person that I am. And, you know, taking the car from what it was and turning it into what it is has truly been an accomplishment. And it's something that, you know, I've touched every part of it. Even though Bill and Earl painted it, I aided with paint up. And, you know, even though Matt applied the powder coat, I helped clean the parts and get them ready. So I've really, really touched every piece of it. And I also work very hard to keep it in the condition that it's in. And along the way, it's gained me some of the greatest friendships that I have and I'll always treasure. And I'm really excited for both the future of the car and the hobby itself.
Very cool. And again, you've done some great and awesome work to that car. You know, congratulations to both you and Matt on that, because it's a showstopper, and it's a eye-popping car too. So, but you know, thank you for sharing everything on that, and why it got the name and stuff like that. So if you ever get a chance to see it in person, please take your time and just look at all the details, because it is something to really just awe about.
Thank you.
We know how hard it is to find Fiero parts. We also know that as years go by, finding parts isn't going to get any easier. The big box stores will never make new Fiero parts because our community is just too small. This is why we need to support the companies that support us. For nearly 30 years, the Fiero store has sponsored our club events, provided free technical support, and produced well over 150 exclusive parts that no big box store would even consider. So, next time you need Fiero parts, head over to thefierostore.com and browse through thousands of products that are specifically designed for your Fiero. That's fierostore.com, the world's largest source of Fiero parts.
All right. Okay. Now let's jump tracks here and talk about the Mid-Atlantic Fiero Owners Association and your guys' prize show, Carlisle. When did MAFAO start and form? How long has it been around?
So MAFAO has been around since 1994. It was formed that December at IRM headquarters in Maryland.
How long have you been a part of the Mid-Atlantic Fiero?
So I don't actually remember how Dad and I found out about it, but we attended our first show and road rally on July 17th, 1999. And the only way I actually remember that date is because 5 years later, unbeknownst to me, it would be my wedding anniversary. So I did not yet know Matt at that time, but whenever I walked past the plaque, we actually won. I think it was either first or second place in the road rally. And I look at the plaque and smile, because I certainly didn't know where I'd be 5 years later on that day.
Very cool. When jumping then ahead into the future, did you imagine yourself becoming the president, or how did that come about? And I mean, going back and talking with Jim and talking with Rob, it just felt, Jim, it felt natural because he started the club. Rob, again, for him, it just felt natural, and he took that position on and has been doing great with it. Is it something that you felt was just that it was just natural to slide into that role, or did you look at it and say, you know, I want to try to take the club into a different direction and kind of show them new things too?
So when I first got involved, that was definitely not on my radar. I mean, I was just a young 18-year-old kid, a girl at that just liked cars and helped my dad work on them. And so I didn't think that anybody would ever view me as qualified to run such a large club. And I want to say probably the following year, I got asked to join the board and help with the newsletter. And then in the fall of 2002, the club's original president, Bob Schlag, was getting ready to retire from the position of president. And at some point he knew in the next few years he'd be moving out of state. And so he was looking to step aside. And when he asked me, I was absolutely astounded because it was a fairly large sized board, mainly made up of men who were my dad's age and maybe slightly younger. And to me, seemingly far more qualified. I mean, I was just a 22-year-old kid and a college, well, first-year teacher, I guess, at that point in life. And so I accepted, and it was an adventure. I spent 5 years in the position the first time around. I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, and was not as level-headed and even keel as I pride myself on being now. And then in 2007, I was in grad school, was newly married. We moved into a new house, had a lot on my plate, and I decided to step aside. And another gentleman took over the club, kind of took it in a different direction that ultimately didn't work out as well. And so in 2014, I got re-involved when a new group of members and a new president kind of took the club over. And then the new president jokingly said, I'm just holding the position until you're ready again. And it took me, I think it was 3 years to say that, okay, it was either 2 or 3 years to say, okay, you know, I'm now, my daughter's old enough. I'm now, you know, kind of settled in here in Virginia. And I believe it was in the fall of 2016 that I stepped back up to the plate. And I'm really enjoying it a lot more this time, I think, because I'm at a different point in my life and my organizational skills are way better. In fact, it's something I pride myself on in being pretty organized. And so it's great. And I have a tremendous board composed of 9 other people that work hard. And so it's really been a privilege, and I plan on sticking with it for a while.
Nice. Do you guys have a newsletter?
We do. We do a monthly e-newsletter that's between 8 and 10 pages. And then every quarter we do an expanded edition, a 16-page expanded edition that members can opt to have mailed to them. We have an exclusively e-membership. And then we have what we call our print edition membership, that those 4 larger expanded editions are mailed to members.
Nice. How many members do you guys have? Is it up and down the East Coast? Sorry.
So our main areas are what is truly the Mid-Atlantic region. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Lower New York, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, DC area, and we have members in Eastern Ohio as well. And so we have just over 100 members. We also have people that have joined from our sister club, the New England Fiero Owners Association. Some of their members have also joined to be members of our club. And then we have other members throughout the United States that just join to support the club because they might come into Carlisle, or they just like to receive the newsletter and other club benefits.
How many events do you guys average a year? Is it mostly car shows, cruise nights?
So we do a pretty nice mix. We host our biggest show, Fiero's, at Carlisle each June. And then we also typically have 1 to 2 spring events. Every year we have a spring fling, which has traditionally been hosted in Lancaster County, Amish Country, Pennsylvania, Lidditz, Pennsylvania specifically. And this spring fling it's always a picnic. And then sometimes we'll do a road rally with it. Sometimes we'll do, 1 year we had like show off your mods event, and we gave little awards for various modifications. We don't typically do a traditional show at that event. And then we also do 1 to 2 fall events, including a show within a show that we call the Fiero Dutch Classic in September, part of a larger rotary car show in N.I.F.E, Pennsylvania. And then we oftentimes will do cruises. We had one planned this spring to the Tidewater area of Virginia with the Central Virginia Corvair Club that has been postponed. And then we've done other cruises in various areas of Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, And really, we're always open to members organizing other events that we promote. So it really varies from year to year.
Oh, very cool. Before we get into your guys' big event of the year, I know this, COVID-19 has struck so many and so far across the world. For Illinois, we are in what they call phases for reopening, and we just graduated to phase 3. Not sure how long we're going to be in there, but do you guys have certain restrictions, and is that going to affect whether it's canceled or postponed or still going to go on, Carlisle?
So as of the day that we're recording this, the show is still on. However, obviously, by the time this airs, definitely be sure to check our club's website and Facebook page to make sure that's the case. Pennsylvania is the state that is home to the Fieros at Carlisle show, and they, like I think every other state, is doing phased reopenings, but they're not doing it statewide. They're doing it by county. And so the county where the Carlisle show is held, Cumberland County, was put into, I guess, phase 1 of reopening, or they're calling it, in Pennsylvania, they're calling them red, yellow, and green. So red is very, very restrictive, complete shelter in place type of orders. And then yellow is some allowance for gatherings, I believe up to 25 people. And they have more expanded business openings and things like that. There is not yet a specific date for Cumberland County that I'm aware of to enter into green, although they're thinking it's going to be sometime in the next week. But right now, green does limit restrictions in social gatherings to 250 people. And Carlisle is much larger than that. Yeah. So I know the team at Carlisle Productions has worked really hard, and they have a plan on their website on how they've made adjustments to the function of their events related to the COVID-19 crisis, and ways that they've worked to ensure that when their events do begin, that they will be taking precautions. And so I feel confident in their approach. Where I'm just unsure is how the state of Pennsylvania is officially going to classify them as a gathering or as an entertainment venue, which has different rules. I'm not honestly sure. So we're still waiting to see.
Okay, that's great news, and hopefully that show still goes on. So try and get this posted within the next 10 days or so. So definitely keep an eye out on their website to make sure before if anybody has plans or anything that goes out there. But so what is Fieros at Carlisle? What and how long has it been going on?
So Fieros at Carlisle is the longest continuously running Fiero show in the country. And now it's being held in conjunction with Carlisle Chevrolet Nationals, which is actually host to all GM products. And it occurs every June. We initially began Fieros at Carlisle in the spring of 1994 when a group of Fiero owners convened at what was then Carlisle's Import Kit Car Show. And they had been invited there because, of course, as many of us know, Fieros are popular platforms for kit cars. And so they decided that it would be a great venue to bring in stock and customized Fieros as well, because there would be a lot of Fiero parts vendors there. And so for the first about 15 years of the show's existence, it ran in May in conjunction with Import Kit Car. It almost always seemed to rain. That was a hallmark of the show. And although the Import Kit Car Show was a 3-day event, the Fiero show itself was a 1-day event on the Saturday. And then starting in 2002, my family began holding we call it the post-Carlisle picnic. And we held those for 5 or 6 years on the day after Carlisle, first at my parents' place in Ole, Pennsylvania, and then at mine and Matt's house in Burnville, Pennsylvania, the last few years. And then in 2009, the Import Kit Car Show began to change and cater more to the tuner crowd. And so it was suggested by Carlisle Productions that we move the Fieros at Carlisle show to the GM Nationals weekend. And then 2 years ago, at the encouragement actually of GM, because of how Newswire services run, they suggested that they change the name to Chevy Nationals because it would actually make the show more readily picked up by news services. There was some marketing thoughts behind that. And so it is called Chevy Nationals, the bigger show that we're a part of, but it is open to all GM products. And Carlisle Productions has been an excellent partner in allowing us to host the biggest Fiero show on the East Coast. At its height, we drew over 125 Fieros, and in recent years, we've started to tick up towards 100 cars again. Last year, we had 74 cars on the show field.
Still a good turnout.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even at its lowest, you know, when I started to get re-involved again a number of years ago, we were still getting in the 40s for cars, and that's gone up. And then last year we expanded to a 4-day event. We built in group meals each night for dinner and for breakfast, some lunches. We did cruises to area attractions, go-karting, parking lot parties, and then of course the show itself.
Very cool. Is it more of a 1-day event, or do you guys, is it like a full 3-4 day weekend event kind of show? And what are some of the events that you guys do during that time?
So like I said, last year we expanded it to a more structured multiple day event. We started with a welcome dinner on Thursday night, and then we did a cruise to the Eastern Motorsports Museum, which was a really, really neat sight to see, just north of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And then the following day, after a group breakfast, we gave people some time to go out to the Carlisle Fairgrounds for the vendors get their cars set up, because the Chevy National Show is actually a Friday, Saturday event. And so while our actual show didn't take place that day, many people wanted to, you know, do some exploration of the Chevy Nationals grounds. And then we did a group lunch and then a tour of the Carlisle Military Museum. It was an outdoor exhibition that's really incredible alongside 81. And then we did a group dinner and a parking lot party that night at the hotel. And then all day Saturday is the Fieros at Carlisle show. And Carlisle actually generously hosts stock notchback and fastback, custom notchback and fastback, modified notchback and fastback, and rebody classes that they do awards for and that everyone on the showgrounds can vote for. And then we do an additional 15 to 20 special awards, including the best in the Midwest for that year. Things like high and low mileage, farthest distance, best club participation from our visiting club, best interior, things like that.
So would you consider that a show within a show, or would you just still consider this like a one show?
So, I mean, I guess technically it's a show within a show, but it's a separate, like we do our own registration, where we like actually process the registrations before passing them on to Carlisle, who distributes the window stickers and things like that. We do our own awards, we pay for our own awards and so on and so forth. But then the Fiero community also gets the larger exposure of being able to be seen by the other several thousand car participants that are there at the Nationals that weekend.
Wow, and that just has to be a sight to see too, with that many cars. You know, we locally here we've got it's the Cruisin' Tigers GTO show, or all Pontiac show, and I think this past year or 2 years ago they had 602 cars. And even like for me going to a show, I think that's the most I've seen besides going to World of Wheels. But I don't even think the World of Wheels in Chicago has over, you know, maybe 300, 400 cars. So just seeing that many cars, it's like, for me, it'd be overwhelming, but I'd be like, all right, I'm going to do this section one day and then come back and do this section another day.
Yeah, it is kind of overwhelming. In fact, like I can't really tell you the last time that I got to truly walk the show field, just because of the amount of time it takes for myself and several of our board members to run the Fiero show. But we're also, Carlisle includes us as celebrity judges. And so I get out at least usually to do the luncheon for that. And then I try to make it a point to go through at least the display buildings. And Matt always makes a point to go and take a look and see, what's in the vendor area. But it's definitely like you could spend the full 2 days there on the grounds. And then we usually stay through the awards ceremony. We do our own awards ceremony. And then we will sometimes like go and have dinner somewhere and then come back for the Carlisle awards ceremony. And then that night we usually go go-karting and then have a farewell breakfast the next morning. So it's a packed weekend.
I was gonna say, yeah, it sounds like a pretty packed weekend. What is the best way for somebody to find out more about the show, your club, and is it just best to get a hold of you or go through Facebook or a website?
So the club website is www.mafoa.com. We also have the Mid-Atlantic Fiero Owners Association Facebook page. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, my email is jennifer.g@fieropride.com. And so you can reach me on that pretty easily. So if anybody has any questions, they can reach out in any of those ways.
Okay, great. And is it, another big part of the Fiero community is the Midwest Fiero clubs.
Have you asked yourself, what is the Midwest Fiero clubs? Well, the Midwest Fiero clubs, which is also a region of the AACA, is a dedicated group of enthusiasts whose passion is to promote and preserve the Pontiac Fiero and the Fiero community. The Midwest Fiero clubs consists of members from existing Fiero clubs across the U.S. The Midwest Fiero club's intent is to support member clubs and promote the Fiero-related events that they offer. The intent is to enable enthusiasts to discover events in their areas other than their own and to warrant participation. This has created a tighter-knit Fiero community of the owners and created some great regional shows that may not have otherwise happened. So, how do I find out about them? You can visit the website at midwestfieroclubs.aaca.com or just Facebook them at Midwest Fiero Clubs AACA and like them.
All right. So this year you guys did something different, and I think it was a great surprise. It was something that helped everybody take their mind off of what is going on in the world and your state and maybe just even your local community. And, by far COVID-19, the pandemic is something that is hit very hard. I think it's going to, and again, I'm not making this political, but in my opinion, I think this is going to be something that lingers for the rest of the year. And can I get your thoughts on this? Again, I don't mean to go political on it, but it's just something that you can't just skip by it. And I think leading into our next segment, just a little bit of your thoughts on what COVID-19 has done to you guys as far as the club and stuff like that. And so just your thoughts briefly.
Yeah, gosh, the rest of the year, I think it's going to impact the rest of our lives, Mike. It's truly astonishing. And I still wake up some days kind of forgetting what's going on in the world until, my day obviously is still impacted by it. And we're really lucky where we live in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia to be kind of naturally isolated. But for me, having to pivot my day job, which is as a high school teacher, teaching remotely, teaching my daughter kindergarten at home, which has definitely shown me why I'd never make it as a kindergarten teacher. And then the thing that's hit me hardest really has been not being able to see my parents, especially my dad who's undergoing chemo. And then seeing friends and friends within the Fiero community struggle has been super
Yeah.
tough. We had to cancel 2 of our spring events. And as I mentioned, you know, as of recording date, I'm still not entirely sure what's going to happen with Carlisle.
Yeah, I'm, you know, with Illinois too. I mean, we were the second state to shut down, and we've been home since May 13th, technically, or I'm sorry, March 13th, and the kids' schools closed. So we've got our daughter who's in kindergarten, and she was remote learning, and we've got our 2 youngers who are 3 and 1, and their daycare has been closed. My wife works for a school district, and they, you know, as soon as they shut down, it's like she's had, you know, 3 kids at home all day, 24/7, and I've been able to work. I was out for 2 weeks at the start, and then you know, they brought me back because of my skill set, and it was just easier for me to do most everything than have 3 or 4 other people come in as well. So I've been fortunate on that end, and I've only talked to one person that's had it, and they told me that the scary thing is while they had it, they just wanted to die, and that's how hard it hit. So I mean, I pray that everybody, you know, who had it gets over it, and but yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it definitely has hit family, friends, you know, the car show and cruise night season hard. And that, you know, definitely leaves a big hole in everybody's heart when they can't get to these events and they just start seeing them drop. And I just heard today that the Tyler show has been canceled. So, and that's what ended July. So, so you guys, during this quarantine, you guys decided to come up with something new, a new concept. What is that concept?
Well, those that know me well know I do my best when I'm busy. And you know, unfortunately, we've known several people that have suffered with COVID-19, and some who have even passed away. And one of the things that COVID's personally affected me in is it's made it very hard for me to fall asleep at night. And my mind wanders to things that are going to happen, hopefully in the future, and things that I'm planning, like Carlisle. And so when shows began to talk about canceling, I really thought about the lost opportunity of people being able to share Fieros that they had worked so hard on. And thus the concept of the quarantine car show was born.
How long did it take for you to come up with the concept?
Well, I thought about it one night as I was falling asleep and kind of like slept on it. And then the next day I was like, had a really good idea last night. What was it? I think it took me about another day for it to kind of all click into place. And I shared it with the board of the club and got their blessing. And it only really took a couple days to put the structure together and get sponsors and get the ball rolling. And so then we gave people 2 weeks to submit their entries and then another 2 weeks to vote.
Did you think that this idea was going to be as big as it was?
Definitely not. I was pleasantly surprised that we had 115 cars and 674 usable photos submitted. Did not expect it was going to get that big at all.
Besides the show itself, so it was basically a 4-week show, 2 weeks for submitting and 2 weeks for voting. What other, I'm going to say events, but I know it's hard to classify them as events, but what else did you have during that time frame?
So Greg Powell Cox invited us to join his Friday night cruise-ins, which he still hosts every Friday night. We also hosted several Facebook Lives for people to spotlight their cars, and I know we got to see, excuse me, Mike. We also hosted several Facebook Lives for people to spotlight their cars, including yours, Mike, which was great to see.
Thank you.
And then I also, you're welcome. I also hosted some Facebook Lives to show off our collection, which wasn't entered in the show, and to give some show updates. And then we also did a trivia night, and we're going to actually continue the trivia nights throughout at least the next few months, and then we hope to make them regular winter events as well.
And what's the turnout been with the Facebook Live and the cruise in and the trivia night?
The turnout was great. We had over a dozen Fiero owners participate in the trivia night and most of the cruise-ins. And the Facebook Lives were really cool too, because people could either watch live or tune in later. And so those oftentimes had several dozen views and many comments.
When you started thinking of putting the show on, how did you come up with the concept of it being virtual as far as registration and balloting, and what was the process on that? And is it something that when people voted, did it generate into, I mean, did you build it in Google Docs and then it generated into sheets, so it was very little touching of actual like emails or stuff like that you had to actually physically count the numbers, or did it generate it all on its own?
So thank God for Google, because it was nearly all Google. We used Google Forms for voting, Google Sites to host the show, Google Albums to host the pictures. The only thing not totally Google was a Chrome add-on called Photor, which we used to tag the photos.
Off topic on this, has anybody reached out to you guys for you guys to, in essence, build them a virtual car show?
So we've given advice to somebody that I'm not sure if they're going to be moving forward with it. But there has been a conversation, and maybe by the time that this podcast airs, we'll hear more about it. But I was able to share some of our forms that we had built, and also some advice on things that I'd do differently.
So you guys, we can plan on seeing maybe one more next couple of years, or one a year from you guys on this, because it was fun. I mean,
yes.
It was different and fun.
So we definitely plan to make this a yearly event, hopefully under more normal winter circumstances than COVID. So definitely keep an eye out for it. I would say probably early into 2021 to see another online car show, which hopefully won't be called a quarantine car show.
Yeah, hopefully not. You promoted this mostly on Facebook. Was there other media outlets that you guys had promoted this on besides, also your website? But was the main grasp of this through Facebook?
Yeah, the main kind of hub of it was Facebook. It was just easy to do through an event page, but we also made sure to loop in participants and members that were not on Facebook. And they are able still to watch the Facebook Lives. And then they were also able, we did some stuff on Zoom as well. And so they were able, we had one specific Zoom session, and they were able to participate in that more fully as well. And then we did some promotion on Instagram, but the real rate of return was Facebook. And then we, of course, also advertised it on Pennox as well.
Once, so you opened registration, and you kept it open for a couple weeks, and you were able to upload images of your cars. Was there a certain way that, or a certain amount of pictures that were allowed? They had to be, outside interior, engine if they wanted, front compartment, and with all the pictures that were sent in, how manageable was that, and how long did it take you guys? 2 weeks to go through all those images?
So that's definitely something I learned the first time around. We basically strongly required, although we didn't not allow people to participate if they sent less, but we said a side shot, interior shot, and an engine compartment shot, as well as an optional front compartment shot. We were cognizant of the fact that people, in some cases, still had their cars in storage, and because of the quarantine, couldn't easily access them. So we wanted to be respectful of allowing participation of whatever people could send. But we made a mistake in not putting an upper limit on the amount of pictures. Someone sent 19. Although, yeah, some of the pictures were a little repetitive, like, a picture of my car in this beautiful setting and this beautiful setting. And so we pared them down a little bit. But next time we're going to set a specific limit for sure. because it was pretty tedious. Every single photo that we received, we had to label with the car's class and entry number. And then the first photo, which was typically a side shot of the car that we had in the album, also had other essential information about the car. And so that was placed on kind of the opening photo for the car. And so it was basically a two-man team, myself and Dave Steinmetz, one of our assistant activities directors, who was actually in the midst of moving while we were doing this. And we spent many late nights, particularly on the days before show launch, tagging the photos. So it was definitely a process, but it was fun too, to get to see all the cars that we were, I got to intently look at almost every single car that was submitted.
When you say that, and it brings back memories for me when the last 2 times that we did the Fiero playing cards, and it was, the submissions that came in, and it's like, yeah, you would have, you have somebody with 1 picture, and then you have somebody with like 20 pictures, and then you have to narrow that down. And then, you would get, I think the first time we did the playing cards, we got over 2,000 photos, and I had to take those photos, narrow it down, and then we had a vote on to pick 52 cards. And out of those 52 cards, you had to keep the aces and the jokers separate because those were for the prototypes. So really, you were down almost to like 46 cards or so. And it's like, it is a very tedious project or process. So I'm right there with you. So once you got through that, registration closed, voting was going on for a couple of weeks. And during that time, people got to do the Facebook Lives and show more of their car if they couldn't show them all in pictures. Was the voting open to just the participants, or did you open it up to participants and maybe family and friends? And do you think that got a good response? And what I mean response is, do you think that got a good return rate on the voting from what you guys put into it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We had over 200 votes, like voters, ballots submitted. And we opened it up to anybody in the community, whether it was, other Fiero owners who just hadn't had a chance to submit pictures, or, friends of Fiero owners. And that was kind of cool too, because we did have a section for comments, and it was mainly to get feedback on the show for the next time we did it. But there were some people that were not Fiero owners, and the comments that they made about how incredible the Fieros was really cool to see. And so that was pretty awesome. And then we had one participant who sat down with his entire family, and they projected the show on their TV, and everybody went through and like picked their favorite cars. And so that was a pretty cool thing to hear about too. So it was like family day at the car show, except it was in your living room.
That's cool. That's cool. Did and earlier you mentioned sponsors. How did you present this idea to them, and did they take it like, okay, you're crazy, or
No.
okay, yeah, let's.
So people in the Fiero community have known me long enough to know that I do come up with interesting ideas at times. And I've always thought you don't get what you don't ask for. So I started out by reaching out to sponsors that I knew really well, and that knew that I was invested in the Fiero community. And Rodney Dickman, Russ Warmuth of Fiero Interiors, Mr. Mike, Matt at the Fiero store, Fiero John, and all of them quite readily stepped up. And then I even got an unsolicited email from our friend Tom Schmidt for Tom Schmidt Motorsports to sponsor a class. Yeah. And cool. Yeah. And Tom and Ann, they're always so wonderful to the Fiero community. And so this allowed us to create some nice prizes, because the entries were free. Like, you didn't have to pay to enter the show. And so first place received a $25 gift certificate, either to one of the sponsoring businesses, or one of the sponsors even did gift cards to Walmart, because he said some people's cars are done and maybe they want something else. And then Fiero John was second place gift certificates for $15. And then third place participants received a free MFOA e-membership. And then we also did 2 daily raffle prizes, one for a participant in the show where we did a random number generator and picked a participant. And then the other was for someone who engaged with the content on Facebook or through Zoom, whether or not they were an actual entrant in the car show. So many people had opportunities to win. And then we also did prizes for trivia night.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you guys really put this thought into it and really put it together really well. And so what was the final total car count and that everybody had a chance to look at?
There were 115 cars, including 2 go-karts. And that the go-kart class was actually an afterthought. Because our friend Dan Theroff, he submitted a go-kart as his entry, and so I thought, dang, I kind of missed an opportunity there. So next time we will include a go-kart class, but was able to add in Matt's go-kart to compete with Dan, and so we ended up with 115 cars and a total display of 674 photos.
Wow. And I know you mentioned this as trying to be, maybe something that's annually done during the course of the winter months. I truly think that would be really cool because, for us here in Illinois, our season ends at Fiorama, and we do have one more event that's done in October, which is our fall color tour. Some people do and don't take their cars, but I mean, for me, my car sits from, basically the second, third week of September until, depending on what our weather's like, which has been really crappy this year. It's been raining almost every other weekend. So I don't think I've really only got the car out twice in the spring just to drive it out a little bit. But doing something like this during the winter months, I think will keep everybody's peak interest high, and it gives you something to do because there is, with you guys in the East, those are like the dreaded months, and you don't know what type of weather you're going to get. So I really do hope and look forward to if you guys do this during the winter months, and whether it's at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, I think it's going to be really great, and it's a great idea. What are some of your final thoughts on the style of this event, and would you recommend it to other groups that they want to do it, or is it something that maybe this turns into a larger event where you see 200, 300, 400 cars maybe?
Yeah, wow. That would be crazy. I think probably the coolest thing about it was the opportunity to see cars that I'd never seen before, that many people had never seen before. I mean, we had entries from all across the United States, literally from Oregon to Florida, from California to Maine, and we even had cars from Sweden and New Zealand. And
I do remember seeing something like I think I do remember seeing those. That was cool. I mean, it's like to get that far reach on that too.
Yeah. So it was pretty amazing. And I definitely think that was really the high point of it. And if there's any other clubs out there that, find themselves in the situation of COVID-19 canceling your show this year, I mean, I just saw today or yesterday, the AACA fall meet at Hershey was canceled.
I heard that, and
yeah,
I'm like, for them, and that's in September, right?
October, actually. Yeah.
October, yeah.
Yeah.
And for them to put their show on hold and cancel for the year, it's like, it's sad, and it's heart-wrenching too, because I know a lot of people that I know, and I know a lot of people you guys know, that's like a premier show for them, and they love going to that. So
yeah, so it's crazy. So if anybody finds himself in that situation, I'm truly happy to share any materials with you, how the forms we created, the structure, the things we learned, and any support we can give. More than happy to help.
Well, I appreciate that, and everybody who, probably wants to try to do something like that will appreciate it too. So, you guys did some great work on that, and it it helped break things up too. Um, again, jumping topics. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but the shuttle launch today,
Mhm.
and finally seeing somebody, two people lifting off and technically it wasn't a shuttle. It was almost, I consider, old school, where they're in a capsule on a rocket going up. So it kind of brings back to the Apollo and the Gemini missions, but it breaks it up and it gives you something to look at and do while you're in essence stuck at home. So no, I wish you guys all the best of luck on trying to get this to an annual, maybe a winter show style. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. I saw it, like you guys said, you see so many different cars that you may not be able to see because they're on the West Coast or the East Coast or down south or, overseas. So yeah, it's great, 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 great.
Thank you.
Are you looking for that something for that special someone and not sure what to get them? Well, it is time to visit the Northern Illinois Fiero Enthusiasts store for all your club merchandise needs this season, or even during the summer, spring, fall, winter, whenever you need it. They have a wide range of items from the Enthusiast Guide to the Pontiac Fiero, sweatshirts, t-shirts, ECM code readers, and much more. By supporting and purchasing items from the N.I.F.E store, you're supporting the club as well as promoting the club. By doing this, you help to keep Fiorama free to all its members, help in supporting local charities, and help us offset costs of printing of club flyers and other printed materials throughout the year. So click on FieroFocus.com, then on the store tab, and check out all the merchandise available for purchase, and help support your club today. That's FieroFocus.com/store.
All right. So going into some of our final questions and thoughts, most recently you guys have, do I say, made a new acquisition of a Fiero, or is it something that it was kind of a save, and it has a North Star power plant, from what I heard in it? Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Sure. I've gotten this question a lot lately, as a matter of fact. So the car was known in its heyday as Purple Rain. And
there's that name. There's those names again.
Yep. And you better start working on one for yours. But for me, it was the first super show car Fiero that I ever saw. And I remember seeing it in Columbus in 1999 at the first FFCOA Nationals that I went to. And by then, it had been around for a few years. It was rumored that the chrome illusion paint job on the car cost around $15,000 alone. And wow. Yeah, and I obviously, as I mentioned, the first modified Fiero I saw had a 383 in it. But just seeing a North Star power plant in a Fiero and how clean that conversion looked was just mind-boggling. And I don't know that it was the first North Star, but if it wasn't the first, it was the second. I'm not sure whether Jonathan Watts, who was the owner of Purple Rain, or John Norman did the first North Star conversion. What's kind of unique about Purple Rain is that it actually uses the Cadillac cradle in the Fiero. And so wow. It's a really unique swap. And the day that we picked the car up, we actually had the opportunity to see the car up on a lift. And so shortly, at the show itself, someone even managed to capture a picture of me looking at the car, and it was in the FOCOA magazine. And I later the night we got home from picking the car up from saving it, I was looking for some information on it and came across the photo and just thought, wow, that really took me back in time. And it was pretty cool to see that connection documented. And so shortly after the show in Columbus, the car's owner and builder, Jonathan Watts, was going through a divorce, and the car supposedly went into hiding so that it couldn't be part of the divorce settlement. Not sure of how true that story is or not. But Jonathan passed away within a few years and the car disappeared. And ironically, just about 6 weeks ago, in one of MFOA's first Throwback Thursday Facebook posts, we posted a picture of the car and asked if anybody ever knew what had happened to it, but no one did. And so I guess it would be a week and a half or so ago, 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday night, I had actually set my phone down for a little while. And when I picked it up, I realized that I had been bombarded by nearly a dozen Facebook messages and also a text message from the individual that will be the car's future owner. And all of the messages said, "Oh my God, look what popped up. And it's in Virginia Beach, and it's not that far from you," which,
Wow.
3.5 hours, relatively speaking, I guess isn't that far. And, I was instantly saddened to see that the car had fallen into a state of disrepair. Apparently, the car was purchased from Jonathan Watts or from his estate by someone somewhere in Pennsylvania, and they basically beat on the car and broke the transmission, burned the tires off of it. It was in really rough shape, and then they left it sit outside, which essentially destroyed the paint. Then in 2013, a Fiero owner and member of the U.S. Navy who was based out of Virginia Beach came across the car, purchased it with the intent of restoring it. Unfortunately, as the military will sometimes do, they get in the middle of your best plans, and the gentleman kept pulling ship duty instead of the anticipated shore duty that he was hoping to have, and was based out of places like Hawaii, and was unable to finish the car. And then he recently received a transfer to Rhode Island and was given a very short amount of time to sell his house and execute the transfer. And the car is not running. Its wheels were frozen, so it was not something that you were just going to easily load onto a trailer. And another Fiero owner and friend in Virginia Beach apparently either knew he had the car, I guess he knew he had the car, but didn't know that he was planning on scrapping it, and found out that Wednesday that the car was going to be scrapped by noon on Thursday. And so the gentleman, Rob Jensen, took pictures of the car, posted it on Facebook, and thus spurred the messages to me.
So you were able to save it before it went to the scrapyard. That's a fast turnaround if you want to say that like that.
I mean, honestly, literally why I did not have my phone on and accessible when the messages were coming in was because Ashley had just finished her pitch for a quarantine kitten. And Matt had asked her for 48 hours to make a decision, which was basically his way of thinking of 48 hours in which he could try not to break her heart by saying no. And because, we already have several animals here at our little farm. And so we had just spent about an hour in discussion with her, and I was able to change his mind. And so I was pretty stoked about my successful negotiating skills on her behalf. I mean, she certainly helped. She made a whole presentation about why she should have a kitten. And so I had literally just finished that, and then got these messages and thought, ooh, how am I going to talk him into an 8-hour round trip with a trailer to pick up another Fiero? So when I succeeded, I felt like I could go into negotiations for a Fortune 500 company. But really, while I personally, have an attachment to the car because of what it was, it's a project that's going to need a tremendous amount of work. And we've got our NDSD4 that we're, working on, the potential future LS4 project with the Blue Demon, some other projects, and it's more than we really needed. But Matt and I have always joked that our collection is somewhat incomplete because we have an 84 Indy, we have the stock and the Blue Demon 85 GTs. We've got an 86 coupe and then my silver 88 GT. We don't have an 87. And of course, you know, my favorite color is blue. And, you know, always like those blue 87 GTs. And since I can't steal Fred's and Annette's, I, you know, had kind of been keeping an eye out for one. And a friend texted me and he said, if you can go get that car, I will give you my blue 87 5-speed GT.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now it's a project. I mean, this is not a finished car by any means. So we're trading project for project, but we're each going to end up with projects that we want. And the irony of it all is when he sent me a picture of the car's title, the last place it was titled was in Reading, Pennsylvania, my hometown. So,
oh, wow.
You know, I might have seen this car before. So I'm hoping it's not the one that belonged to my kind of crazy ex-boyfriend in college, but only time will tell.
But you know what though, it's something that you saw, you know, in the olden days, and it made its way back to you in theory. And I mean, it's a cool, like, roundabout story too, and it's going to somebody who is within the community and who wants to, you know, work on it and get it back up to the way it should be. So, you know, it couldn't have come back to a better place too. So.
Yeah, and I'm confident. While I'm not going to disclose the new owner because I want them to have their moment of disclosure, I'm confident that it's going to a good home.
Oh yeah, and I wouldn't want you to say anything about that. I just think it's really cool that, you know, it came back around and you were able to save it and you know, and get it to a good home. So that's what, you know, I love seeing is, you know, these cars that have kind of fallen out by the wayside are coming back around and going to good homes. So that's why I hope, you know, if somebody's willing to take up the cars that Tim's got up in Michigan, you know, and get them back up to running and you know, looking great condition. I mean, that's something that I think will look really good too. So so moving along, I've talked to Jim and I've talked to Rob. Both of them are the presidents of their respective clubs, and I know you touched base on this. You said you left the presidency for a while and you came back, and both have said that actually Rob hasn't yet, but Jim has taken many sabbaticals where he's still very active in the club, but he just steps out of the president role, and he kind of sees the club from a different angle as a member versus as the president. Rob has said that, you know, he's willing to try that, you know, just to kind of just take some stress off. And he said he really wished he would have done that after the 35th. But do you see any you know, positives or negatives with taking a sabbatical? Something that, you know, like for me, I've been part of N.I.F.E since '97, and I don't think I've ever stepped away. And it's like you kind of need that battery recharge. And I know when you stepped down and then became president again, you said you had a different view. Do you think that's something that people should do with large clubs, that just step back for a little bit, recharge your batteries?
So, you know, I think that for me on a personal level, it was a positive to kind of mature and come back on board. As I mentioned, you know, I became president when I was only 22 years old. I had just started working my very first job. I wasn't married yet. I actually didn't even know Matt. And so I was really still tremendously growing as a person. And it was a lot for a 22-year-old kid to take on. I mean, it was at that point in time, and you know, still is. We're one of the biggest Fiero clubs in the United States. It was a lot of responsibility, and I just didn't have the life experience in sometimes dealing with people's concerns and problems in the same fashion that I do today. One of the things I've always tried to pride myself on is being, fair and diplomatic. And so I think, coming back on as a more mature adult has allowed me to execute those skills in a much better fashion than in my younger years. And so, right now I'm still really tremendously enjoying, being at the helm of the club. And I've got a great board that's very supportive. Things are really positive, and I don't feel like it's a drain. So I think as long as I, continue to find it to be an enjoyable experience, I think I'll stay very actively involved in this role.
Yeah. And that's a different perspective too. Like with, Jim being the president since 91, he doesn't really step away. And when he steps away, it's for a year. But no, I like how when you stepped away and you came back, you felt more mature in that aspect of learning a lot more and how to be more diplomatic and stuff like that. That's a good way to look at it. I never looked at it that way, to where you step away and it's like you're still active, but you're just looking at it differently. How much longer do you see yourself being involved with Fieros? I mean, is it something where it's going to be with you till the day where you just say, all right, kids, here's your collection?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I ever really see an endpoint. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I did take a hiatus, like a really, truly a hiatus for a number of years. And one of my greatest regrets is that hiatus occurred during the Tyler build. I actually did not really know anything about it because I wasn't going on Pennox. I wasn't really connected to anybody in the community all that actively. Occasionally Fred would see Fred. He would come to visit when he was in the area, and we would have dinner. But I found out about the Tyler build after the fact. Even Rob, who's one of my close friends, we just went through a period of time where we weren't talking as much. And so I really, really regret missing that. And I think that that's fueled me to never want to have that kind of gap again. We had even talked about coming back out for the 30th, but then literally in the weeks before found out that we were expecting. And so unfortunately, Ashley had other plans that didn't make travel available to us at that time. So missing those two events is definitely high on my list of regrets in life. And so I don't ever plan on taking a break again.
Okay. That's a nice, honest answer there. I consider you guys having a pretty large collection of Fieros. I got my one, and I had the opportunity. I purchased another one, and it was looking at doing a swap, but time was not on my side. At the time, money was not on my side, and then getting married and so I have one, and I'm very happy with one. But I look at what during the Quarantine Car Show, your collection, and your collection is great. And do you feel that you rank up there with our Fiero guru, Fred Bartemeyer, and his collection?
Oh gosh, nobody ranks up there with Fred in style nor substance. Definitely, Fred is incomparable. But I think we've tried to curate a collection that's meaningful to us, and Fred's collection is certainly meaningful to him. Mm-hmm. As every collection that's owned by a collector. I think we're all grateful to Fred for the work that he's done to preserve the Fiero hobby, and our own personal collection would not be in the position that it's in, particularly the SD4 project that we have. It's very unique without Fred's support and his friendship, and I'm certainly grateful to him for that. I've been working on a petition for him and Annette to adopt me, or at the very least Ashley. I mean, technically, if Fred was a very young father, he could have been mine. But so far I haven't gotten that to be successfully achieved. But and we're kind of the mindset of if 6.5 may not be tops. I mean, it is for now because that's what we've got the space for. But if the opportunity ever does present itself to own something and preserve it for the community, it's something we'd be receptive to for sure.
Yeah. So what about, and I know he doesn't have this in his collection, and I have yet to see anybody add this to a collection. What about a Zimmer? Would you consider adding a Zimmer to your collection?
It's kind of funny because one actually just popped up in Mechanicsville, Virginia, which is about 2 hours away from here, about a week ago. If someone gave me one, I probably wouldn't turn it away, but it's just not really my cup of tea. And I definitely wouldn't pay the 15 grand they were asking for it. Not that it's not worth it, but it's just not worth it to me.
So looking into the future, we've got another, 2.5, 3 years until the 40th. Thoughts on where the Fiero has come and where it's going in the community? Do you see the community growing, or just kind of keeping at that steady pace of being a collector car now?
I think that the Fiero has come farther than anybody at GM ever expected it to. I mean, we've all heard, our friends that worked on the Fiero project say that so many times over the years. And I think one of the things that has been really cool has been, seeing people kind of come back to the Fiero project after time away, like David and Ben and so on and so forth at this past show. And I think that says something about our community and the people in it. And I think for me, seeing so many younger Fiero owners, people who remind me of myself. I just had a conversation a week or two ago with Larkin Christie, and he was talking about paying for some type of upgrade on his car, and I said, hey, don't forget, when I was your age, my car didn't look like what it does, and it's certainly the concept of owning so many quality Fieros at one time wasn't something that was achievable. And so I had a goal. I'll never forget at the 1999 show in Columbus, seeing the Devilish car from Ontario, and how amazing that car was, and thinking, I want a car just that beautiful. And it took time, but I'm now very proud of what's in the garage. And I think, if we can continue to fuel those goals and that passion of our younger crowd, Christina Kahn's a great friend, and she comes out for Carlisle. And, I always thank Dayton Shirey for being the guy who wanted to buy my dad's car and probably also paint it purple like his other one. And it ended up having me purchase it and have it come to Virginia. So, I think seeing kids like that, and the passion that they have, it might not be the same passion and the same goals that we had at that age, but seeing them so excited and enthusiastic about the cars is inspiring, and it makes me feel like, there is still growth that's going to happen in the hobby, and there's still going to be, really awesome things to look forward to at the 40th and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that the 40th is just as big as the 35th, because that was a great show. And I look forward to, the 40th coming up, and it just sucks that it's still 2.5, 3 years away, but you do need time to plan those ones. So, and again, thank you for joining me on this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as well as I did. And we hope that this brings a little bit more sunshine to you guys out there during this tough time here in the United States. But, I hope that Carlisle does take place, and they're able to kind of come and together and get that show off, because I think a lot of people need something like that right now. thank you, everybody listening, and a big thank you to tonight's guest, Jen Goss. Pleasure. It's always nice to hear other stories and just get to know everybody closer on that one-on-one basis. So thank you very much for joining me on that again. So
Thanks for having me.
and again, you can find all these podcasts at FieroFocus.com under the video tab. And, some of the future podcasts that I got coming up here is, the Fiero Price Guide with Paul Vargas, the Ladies of N.I.F.E, the Original Owners Group, Christian Sass, the Fiero Store, Fiorama, Let's Talk V8 Archie, Let's Talk V8s with V8 Archie, the Midwest Fiero Clubs, and then try to get Fred to open up about his prototypes. And I fear that one a little bit because I think that's going to be like a 4-parter. So yeah, and again, thank you to the Fiero Store, the N.I.F.E Store, and the Midwest Fiero Clubs for being part of our podcast as well. So again, if you have any information that you'd like to share or future ideas of some podcasts, you can email me at Mike Kroyer, that's MKROYER, at FieroFocus.com. And again, thank you everybody for listening, and have a good night and keep Fieroing.